Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RIDE User Training, Part 213 Submittals. My name is Mike Gurney. I'm with EGLE's Environmental Support Division. I'm going to jump through just a few brief intro slides here, and then I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Dave Banlow to get us started here today. So just a couple things. Number one, we are recording this webinar. So if you miss anything or if you want to share it with folks, it will be posted hopefully on the RIDE website in the next few days to a week or so. So keep an eye out for that. I'll try and follow up with everyone with an email to that link as well when it's ready. But we are recording the webinar today. All of the lines are muted. They will remain muted throughout the webinar. We're going to have a question and answer portion at the end. So if you do want to raise your hand at that point, we can help unmute you and you can ask your question, or feel free to use the question and answer box in Zoom throughout the presentation today. I'll keep an eye on it. If there's anything that I need to jump in and ask that's time sensitive, I can do that. Otherwise, we'll probably hold on to all the questions until the very end and address those during the question and answer portion. So I don't see anybody on the phone here yet today. If anyone does join just by phone, I'll remind folks it's #2 to raise your hand. Otherwise, you can use the raise hand function in the Zoom webinar. So with that, I'm all done talking, and I'm going to hand it over to Dave Banlow to get us started here today.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Banlow. I'm the RIDE database specialist for EGLE RRD. Just give you a little background about me. I was an environmental consultant for about 10 years, working mostly on Part 201 and Part 213 sites here in Michigan. In 2015, I joined RRD as a project manager, and I was one of the supervisors in that office for about 5 years. The RIDE database specialist is a new position for EGLE as we continue to develop this RIDE system. So my job involves working as the liaison between RRD and the development team to ensure that RIDE is developed with the functionality that we want and also the functionality that you in the regulated community want. So I'm the primary point of contact for questions and troubleshooting issues related to RIDE. Today, we're going to cover a little background on what RIDE is, how to become a RIDE user, and how to submit documents related to our Part 213 program through RIDE. Okay, so what is RIDE? RIDE's an acronym for the Remediation Information Data Exchange. So essentially, it's a relational database that houses information on the locations that RRD regulates. It's a data exchange, meaning that users can get information from RIDE, and they can also add information to RIDE by submitting reports and correspondence electronically. We use RIDE internally at RRD to track everything from project costs, site narratives, risk conditions, and other information applicable to our work. The public can use RIDE to find information about our sites, and it's our goal to link all of our public documents to the RIDE system so that RIDE can be used as an alternative for FOIA requests in the future. The RIDE project was initiated a few years ago. We're still in the development phase. We use the EGLE development process. So if you're not familiar with EGLE, this alternative, rather than offering a big launch of an application, once it's done, we do batch releases as development occurs. This approach was selected so that we're able to receive feedback from our users and make changes as desired. So the downside is that users will experience bugs in the system. Sorry in advance for that. But those will help us identify opportunities for system improvements along the way. So any bugs or issues should be reported to me so that they can be reviewed by our development team and we can work out a fix. Currently, RIDE is only accepting submittals for the Part 213 locations. That's what we'll describe in this training. Future releases will include Part 201 submittals, including the BEAs. Contractors working for RRD will also be able to submit their invoices and reports for state-funded projects through the RIDE system. So the first page I want to direct you to is the RIDE informational webpage. On this page, you'll find instructions for becoming a RIDE user guidance documents for using RIDE, and links to the RIDE and the MyLogin system. So that's that web page kind of highlighted there in red. Recorded webinars, including this one, will be posted on this page, as well as any updates about the RIDE system. So let's get started with becoming a RIDE user. So to become a RIDE user, you want to open the application on the RIDE informational web page, or you can just navigate to that web address in the upper right corner of the screen, eagle.state.mid.us/RIDE. This will take you to RIDE's main landing page. There are different modules here represented by the different buttons. All of those are in the process of being updated. The primary module for most users is going to be the inventory of facilities. There in the top left. The inventory of facilities is a listing of all the Part 201 and Part 213 locations that are regulated by RRD. And this is also the portal where registered RIDE users can provide their submittals electronically. So to begin on becoming a RIDE user, you can either select the inventory of facilities button, or you can select that become a RIDE user button on the right side. That'll navigate you to a page where you'll want to find a button entitled become a RIDE user. You might have to scroll down on the page to get to it, but you'll just want to select that button and complete the form. And this is regardless of whether or not you have a MyLogin account already. This is for becoming a RIDE user, and we need this information in order to register your user account. So this is the first step. Come here, select that button, and fill out the form. Once you complete it, you should get an email with instructions on how to set up your MyLogin account. Okay, so this is the MyLogin for third-party page. RIDE, like many other state applications, requires a MyLogin for third-party user account. The MyLogin system is the state of Michigan's identity management tool, and it allows users the ability to access state services and systems online across multiple departments using a single user ID and password. So applications are available for Secretary of State, DHHS, Treasury, as well as other EGLE applications, all through this system, all with a single user ID and password. Each user should have their own MyLogin account, and that will act as their electronic signature for reports. This includes owner-operators who are submitting reports through RIDE. We'll discuss that a little bit later. If you don't have a if you don't already have a MyLogin account, you want to sign up and follow the prompts. But if you do have one, you don't need to set up a new one. You can use your existing account to request access to RIDE. So once you log in, you'll see a page like this, and what you'll want to do is go to that request access button at the top, and you'll want to search RIDE. You can see next to the search bar, there's a select agencies drop down. You can navigate to EGLE, and that should bring up a listing of all the applications that EGLE is offering through MyLogin, including RIDE. And then you'll select that and follow the prompts. Note that it can take 1 to 5 business days to process your request. I try to get to them pretty quickly, but it can take a couple days if I'm out of the office or I've got some other obligations going. So please note that when you're setting up your account. If you have trouble with the MyLogin system, either accessing or creating an account or finding the right application, please contact the MyLogin support team at the number up there at the top right of the screen. They can help you better than I can with that. So I can answer questions and help you out with the RIDE system. But for MyLogin, this is the group that you want to contact. Okay, so once we have a MyLogin account, you'll always access the ride application through your MyLogin account. So once you have all the access approved and you're a ride user, when you want to access ride, you'll go to your MyLogin, you'll log in and you'll select the ride application. If you select a different link like the one on the ride informational webpage, it'll open the application, but you'll still be a public user. So you want to access the application through that MyLogin account, and that'll access your unique user ID. So as mentioned previously, the inventory of facilities is going to be the primary module that you use in RIDE. It's a listing of all the Part 201 and Part 213 locations regulated by RRD, and it's the portal where you will provide your submittals electronically. The top here just includes a description of what the inventory is, and it also includes a table of statistics that we're required to report per Part 201 statute. You can hide all that by selecting the toggle button on the upper right of the screen, or you can just scroll past it to get to the table of the inventory. So this is what the table looks like of all of the 201 and 213 sites that we have in the system. It's populated with preloaded columns so that you can search or filter the inventory. An example would be if you wanted to view only Part 213 locations and only in Grand Rapids, you would select the regulatory program. You would select Part 213 for that, and in the city, you would type Grand Rapids. You can also sort the table by selecting the up or down arrows next to the column. So you can sort facility IDs not chronologically, numerically, by selecting that up or down arrow. If you already know your facility ID number, you can just type it in to that far left column where it says facility ID. You can also add columns to the table by selecting the display drop-down menu. So the display drop-down menu, that allows for many more columns to be added to the table. So you can select individual columns, or you can select all of the columns by choosing select all, however you want to navigate and filter the table. The additional columns are added to the right side of the table, so you might need to go to the bottom of the page and scroll to the right to see them. A helpful hint that I use is if you have a Windows operating system and a mouse with a scroll wheel, you can hold down the shift button and use the scroll wheel, and that'll scroll to the right and left rather than up and down. That makes it a little bit easier for me when I'm navigating a big table. There's also a feature that we added called Save Views. So to save a view on the table, you'll want to filter to your desired criteria. So we'll use that example of 213 is our regulatory program. Grand Rapids is our city. We can save that view by selecting the save icon. You want to name it first. So type in the name that you want, select the save icon. And then if you select that list button to the right, you have the option to star that view, and that'll make it your default view anytime you open the RIDE application. If you want to clear the filters, you just select that clear filter button on the right side, and that'll clear out that saved view and bring you back to the unfiltered view of the table. You can also export the table by selecting the export button. That'll download the table into a CSV file, which you can open in Excel and manipulate however you want that way. Okay, so once you find the facility that you're looking for or you're interested in, you can view more information about that facility by selecting the ellipses on the far right side of the row. Again, you might need to scroll to see those, but by selecting that, you'll see informational menus, including location submittals. And this will be what you want to navigate to in order to submit a report electronically. And I'm going to turn things over to the good Dr. Steve Buikema to talk about how to submit a submittal through RIDE. So Steve, you are up.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I'm Steve Buikema. I'm a project manager in the Kalamazoo District Office, and I work mainly in the 213 program, and I'll be walking you through the next part of the training today. So we just finished the first section of this presentation, which was all about getting into RIDE, getting set up as a registered user, and navigating to the site you're interested in. In this next section, I'll walk you through the steps of submitting a submittal. And the title here, RIDE Guide Submitting Submittals, sounds a little funny or at least a little redundant, but the reason for this is that RIDE allows several different document types to be submitted. So not only can you submit reports, but you can also submit correspondence and other documents into RIDE as well. Next. So here's a list of different submittal types that can be submitted directly into RIDE. And most of these have a corresponding EQP form. So we've got notice of on-site work activity, closure report, conditional approval documentation, initial assessment report, final assessment report, conditional approval documentation, closure report, final assessment report, and supplemental information report. And all of these should be pretty self-explanatory. There's one submittal type that does not include an EQP form number, and that's non-form or NF, and that's the third one on this list. Non-form is used for any submittal type that doesn't have an EQP form associated with it. So one example where you'd use non-form might include asking for an extension request for an IAR or a FAR. You can, and we would encourage you, you can submit extension requests directly through RIDE as a non-form. And how you do that is you'd first create the normal extension request letter and you'd save it as a PDF. And then you would go into RIDE and fill out the non-form information, which we'll look at in just a minute. And then you'll upload into RIDE the PDF file that you created earlier, which is the actual extension request document. And you can use non-form for other correspondence related to a site as well. So if you want to submit a specific kind of report, like a FAR or a closure report that has an EQP cover sheet, you can select the applicable document in RIDE and go through the submittal process. And if you're submitting a report that's not required by law, such as a monitoring report or an LNAPL status report, for example, you would submit it in RIDE as a supplemental information report under EQP 4001. And that's the cover sheet that you normally use for that kind of a report. Please note that when submitting reports into RIDE, that this involves entering all the information on the EQP cover sheet directly into RIDE. And this means that you should not fill out a hard copy EQP cover sheet for the report, because RIDE has a form that you'll fill out for each report that replaces the EQP cover sheet. The actual report itself is something that you'll have to create and save as a PDF file before starting the submittal process in RIDE. And the PDF file of the report should not contain the EQP cover sheet. However, for reports that have an EQP form for a table of contents, you'll need to include the table of contents form as part of the report PDF file. And if you'd like to submit something that doesn't have an EQP form, such as correspondence or an extension request, for example, you'd use the non-form option submittal type in RIDE. Next. So as you recall from our last steps, we navigated to a site that we're interested in, and we clicked on the ellipses, the three dots that were at the very right side of the row. And when you do that, you'll see three dark blue horizontal bars, one for releases, one for tanks, and one for location submittals. And location, this is just a term in RIDE that's used for to mean a facility or for a site. So location submittals shows all the submittal options for a particular location or for a particular site. And behind the word location submittals, which you see at the top of the slide here, you'll see a number in parentheses. In this example, it's the number 5. And this number is how many submittals are recorded into the database for this site. And these include documents that were submitted to EGLE, as well as EGLE generated correspondence that's recorded in the database. And when you click on the location submittal bar, it will bring up several additional blue horizontal bars that each represents a different submittal type. And you can see them here. We've got baseline environmental assessment, notice of migration, and there are several other submittal types as well. But I'd like to say a word about the first couple that you see here. First, we're not accepting BEA submittals through RIDE at this point. That will come in a later release. And second, notice of migrations, those are for facilities and not for sites. So notice of migrations typically are not submitted for Part 213 sites. And this training today is focused primarily on 213 submittals. And again, after each submittal type, you'll see a number. And that number corresponds to how many of that particular submittal type are recorded in the database. So to begin the submittal process, find the facility in RIDE, click on the ellipses, the 3 dots at the right side of the row for that facility, and click on the dark blue horizontal bar that says location submittals. And then identify the type of document you'd like to submit and click on the plus sign at the far right side of the horizontal blue bar. And the example here that's highlighted in red is for an initial assessment report. So once you click on the plus sign on the submittal you're interested in, RIDE will open up the submittal wizard and you can start the submittal process. Next. The first thing you'll see is a drop-down list about the submittal in question. And remember, in this example, we're submitting an initial assessment report. If it's a new report, you would select Create New. And you can see a few options here in the drop-down list. And some of these options are grayed out, which means they're not available for this particular submittal. The bottom selection, Revise per EGLE Audit, will be an option only if there was a previous submittal of the same type entered into RIDE that was audited and requires revisions. Some of the other options in the drop-down list are self-explanatory, and I just want to highlight that one of the options is to certify in progress. And this is an option mainly for owners and operators for secondary certification. A consultant would likely fill out the form in RIDE and submit the report into RIDE. And certain reports required under Part 213 require certification by both consultant and an owner operator. And the consultant fills out the form and certifies it in RIDE. And then the consultant should notify the owner operator that a report is ready in RIDE. And then the owner operator would start the same submittal process, except when they get to this first drop-down menu, they would select Certify in Progress to finalize the report and submit it to EGLE. And we'll talk about that toward the end of the training today. But for now, we're carrying on with our example of submitting an initial assessment report. So we select Create New from the drop-down list and we continue. Next. The information that's required for a submittal is divided into 6 sections. And throughout the submittal process, you'll see the current section number highlighted, and you'll see the remaining sections listed below. So the sections include site information, submittal information, which is basically the EQP cover sheet, attachments, organization company, contacts, and review and submit. And on the screenshot to the right, you can see some information at the top. And below that, you'll see a list containing sections 2 through 6. So you'll know that we're currently in section 1 of the submittal process, and you've got sections 2 to 6 to go. Next. So the first section is site information. And if you look at the top left corner, you'll see submittal information, and below that it says final assessment report cover sheet. Okay, so just so you know, a couple slides ago, we selected IAR as the submittal type, but we're going to continue our example by switching to a final assessment report. But regardless of the report type, what you'll be doing in RIDE is filling out the information required in the form. So in site information, this is section 1. Most of this is auto-populated. At the right side, you'll see a map showing the site's location. And on the left side of the page, you'll see basic information about the site, such as facility name, facility ID number, address, latitude and longitude. Just above the gray bar at the bottom of the page is a drop-down list for confirm release number. And you'll have to click that, and it'll give options for all the confirm releases at that particular site. So select the confirm release or releases for that this submittal addresses. And when you do that, the confirm release or releases will populate in the gray bar at the left side at the bottom. The confirm release date, however, does not auto-populate. So you'll have to manually enter the date for each confirm release. And it's not shown on this slide, but there are a couple navigation buttons on the bottom of the screen. There's a next and a previous button at the bottom right corner of each page in the submittal wizard. And you can use those buttons to advance to the next page or go back to a previous page if you need to make any changes. So click the next button to continue. Next. Section 2 is submittal information. This is the information that you would normally provide on an EQP cover sheet, and it should be identical to the cover sheets that we have out there. You'll need to fill out the form completely, and RIDE will not let you leave any of the fields blank. In fact, if you don't fill out any of the fields and you click next to go to the next page, RIDE won't let you go, and RIDE will highlight the missing information in red. Please note that some of the units may not be what you're accustomed to. For example, the units for depth to water is feet and inches, and no decimals are allowed in either of these fields. And on the bottom of the page is distance to the nearest surface water bodies or potable or municipal wells. And the units for these are in feet, which might not make the most sense at your site. So just be aware of using the correct units. And when you're filling out this form, you'll get a prompt for the type of units needed for each field. Also, please note that all of the fields are required. And you might have a site, for example, where you did not encounter groundwater. However, depth to groundwater is a required field on this page, so you won't be able to submit the document until you put some number in this field. In this particular example with depth to groundwater, you might choose to gather some regional data about the depth to the water table, or you might include the maximum depth of your investigation. Regardless of the information you put in these fields, you'll naturally provide a discussion within a report itself. Next. And after you've completed all the submittal information and you click next, you'll get to the attachments page. The attachments page is where you upload the actual report or document that you're submitting. There's an add attachment button. So click that, navigate to the file on your computer that you'd like to upload, and then upload the file. Please note that there is a 150 megabyte limit on the file size, and the file should be a single PDF file. And the PDF file should not contain the EQP cover sheet, since this information was entered into the form in RIDE. However, if you're submitting a report that requires a table of contents EQP form, this table of contents form must be included as part of the single PDF file that you upload. And at the bottom right of this page, you'll see the next and previous buttons that we talked about earlier. And these buttons are the ones that you'll see on every page in the RIDE submittal wizard, and they allow you to navigate to the next page or to back up to a previous page if you need to change anything. Next slide. Section 4 of the submittal process is organization company. And this does not refer to a consulting company, but it refers to the owner-operator responsible for the release. So this would be the same information that you would put on a hard copy cover sheet for owner-operator. So please type the name of the owner-operator into the search bar to see if it's already in the database. If you see the owner-operator listed, you can select it from the search results. If the owner-operator is not an organization on the list, you'll need to contact the RIDE administrator at the email address shown on this slide to get the owner-operator added to the database. And if the owner-operator is not listed, you'll not be able to proceed with the submittal and ride until the organization is added to the database. Next. And once the organization company has been selected, you'll have to select the appropriate address. To select an address, search for the address in the search for address bar, and you should add a new address only if you can't find the appropriate address by searching. And you may have to try a few different search queries to get the address you're looking for. For example, if the address of your organization, let's say it's 100 East Main Street, you can try searching by typing in the number 100, and RIDE should return results that contain the number 100 somewhere in the address, but it's possible that it will not return the address you're looking for. So you might want to experiment around if you don't find the right address at first. You can try searching for 100. You can try searching for 100 Main or 100 Main Street or 100 East Main Street, because it's possible that the address will show up for one of these searches, but not for all of them. And if you're not able to find the address by searching, then please add a new address into the Edit Organization window. Next. The next section is for contacts. And the contact is the representative of the owner operator. So in the previous slide, the organization refers to a company, and in this slide, a contact refers to an individual associated with that company. And again, this does not refer to a consultant, but it's someone associated with the organization listed in the previous page. And you can either select the contact if the correct person is displayed, or select the plus button on the right side of the dark blue bar to add a contact. Next. And after you select the plus button, you'll see this window to add a contact. And there are a few fields that are required in this window, and we have them highlighted in red boxes. But when you're in RIDE, you'll see the required fields marked by asterisks. So in the upper left, there's contact type. And this is a drop-down list that has a lot of different options. And we would like you to choose owner operator. In the upper center of the window, you'll see the start date as a required field for the contact. This refers to the date that the person began their association with the company. If you happen to know that date, you can enter it into the field. But if you do not know the contact's actual start date, you can put the date of the submittal as the start date, and that'll be fine. And the final required field for the contact is address. You can either enter the same address as the organization, or you can enter a different address if the contact is in a different location. Next. And now we come to the last section in the submittal process, which is the review and submit page. On this page, you'll see all the information that you previously entered, and you can review it to see if any changes are necessary. If you find that you need to change something, you can navigate to the previous pages by the previous button in the bottom right corner of the page. And you should always use the previous and next buttons in the bottom right of the window within RIDE to navigate to different pages in RIDE. Do not use your browser's back or forward arrow, but use the buttons that are within RIDE to navigate to different pages. Next. And at the very bottom of the review and submit page is the submitter authorization section. If you're a consultant filling out this form, you'll go to the primary certifier section and select the applicable role from the drop-down list. In this example, it's qualified consultant is selected. The next block of text is where you actually certify the submittal. And there's a drop-down list for the selection of I certify. And below that is where you can add your organization and address. And since the information you're filling out here is about yourself as the primary certifier, the organization would be the consulting company you're associated with if you're a consultant. So organization in this part of the form is different from organization that we saw earlier. And after you filled out all the boxes, you can select submit and exit to submit the document to EGLE and exit the RIDE database. Next. After clicking submit and exit, a warning message will appear for certain submittals that require secondary certification from an owner operator. For submittals that need 2 certifications, the submittal is not considered received by EGLE until it is certified by both a qualified consultant and an owner operator. And the warning box also displays a submittal record number, and it may be useful to make note of this record number for future reference. And here's something that's really important. Qualified consultants, when you submit a report that requires a secondary certification, you will have to let the owner operator know that there's a submittal that requires their secondary certification in RIDE, because RIDE does not automatically notify the owner operator. So qualified consultants, you will have to inform the owner operator so they'll know to go into RIDE and complete the secondary certification. Next. Okay, so we've walked through the process of submitting a submittal in RIDE. And when you select submit and exit, that's where the submittal process ends for most submittals. But some submittals, most notably final assessment reports, closure reports, I think initial assessment reports and supplemental information, they require secondary certification from an owner operator. And it should go without saying that this is not something that a consultant can do, but this requires an owner operator to go into RIDE and to certify the submittal. And this next section of the presentation will walk you through the steps for navigating my board, which is where you'll find the submittals that require secondary certification. Next. So first, there's my board. This is a module in RIDE that you'll need to go to for secondary certification. You can get to my board by selecting it in the left-hand side of the screen. Or if you're on the home page of RIDE, there'll be a button for my board that you can select. And once you've selected my board, you'll see a list of submittals for any facility for which you are associated. And if you look at the screenshot, the column on the far right, that column it says requires your action. And you'll see a check mark in this column for any submittal that is awaiting a secondary certification. The secondary certification must be done by a party that did not do the primary certification. And in most cases, it'll be the qualified consultant doing the primary certification. So it would be the owner operator doing the secondary certification. And this means that the secondary user must be signed into their own unique RIDE account to do this. There are a few other columns on this table. You can see location name, record ID, which is usually the facility ID, submittal type. And this example shows a few different kinds of submittals. There's NOM, notice of migration, NF, non-form, IAR, SIR, which is supplemental information report, and a FAR. And you'll see submittal status. And one of the categories for submittal status is the category submitted. But you'll notice that the row that has a check mark in it, that bottom row, which is the report that the consultant submitted in RIDE, the status is not submitted for this report because this report requires a secondary certification. So it will only display the status of submitted after the secondary certification is complete. So to complete the secondary certification, it's a little cumbersome. When you're in my board and you see a check mark for a submittal under requires your action, unfortunately, you can't just click on the submittal to open it. You'll have to make a note of the submittal and the facility, and then exit my board and go into IOF, the inventory of facilities. And you can see a button for IOF on the left side at the top, just under home screen. Next. And we talked about this at the beginning of the presentation about how to find a facility in RIDE. So you'll have to go through that same process, go to inventory of facilities, IOF, type in the facility ID or the facility name or search for it. And once you find the facility you're interested in, click on the ellipses, the 3 dots at the very right side of the row for that facility. Next. And after you click on the ellipses, the 3 dots, you'll get additional options for that facility. One of the options is location submittals, which you see in the blue bar at the top of the screenshot. And this was covered earlier in the presentation as well. Click on location submittals and look for the submittal type that you need to certify. In this example, we're selecting initial assessment report. And you'll notice that behind the title for initial assessment report cover sheet, there's the number 0, which indicates that no IARs have been submitted for this facility. And just a note here that this number does not include any submittals that are awaiting secondary certification. If a submittal needs secondary certification, it will only be counted after it receives both certifications. So click on the plus sign at the right side of the row to enter the secondary certification process. Next. And after the plus sign, you'll get a drop-down list with a few options. If we're starting to submit a report from scratch, you would select Create New. But in this case, we're wanting to certify a submittal, so we would select Certify in Progress. Next. You'll have the chance to review all the information that was entered into RIDE for the submittal, which corresponds to the information that you would normally find on a cover sheet. And if there are any changes that are needed, then the report will have to be resubmitted in RIDE. If all the information looks correct, navigate to the bottom of the page where you'll find the certification options. And please keep in mind that a secondary submitter, such as owner-operator, will not get an email notice from RIDE saying that a certification is necessary. This is something that needs to be communicated from the consultant, or you can regularly check My Board in RIDE to see if there's a submittal requiring your action. Next. Okay, so this is at the bottom of the page. The information marked with asterisks is required. So enter your role, which could be owner-operator or representative. Select the appropriate certification status from the drop-down menu. You can select I certify to certify that the submittal is complete and true to the best of your knowledge. You can select revisions needed if there are errors in the submission. And if you select revisions needed, it will show the submittal as not received by RRD, and an entirely new submittal will have to be submitted into RIDE. And make sure you fill out all the fields that are marked with an asterisk. After all the fields are filled out, click Submit and Exit that button at the bottom of the page. Next. Okay, so that concludes the training. And we're going to open it up for a time of questions, but I just want to say to keep your eyes open in the next several months, as we're going to be continuing to expand the RIDE database and what it can do, as well as adding more reports to the inventory of facilities for electronic submittal. We're going to take some questions now, but if you have any questions in the future, you can email them to eagle-ride-admin@michigan.gov. And we also have additional information and resources available on our website.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Dave. We do have a handful of questions, so I will just kind of run down the line here and see who wants to take them. So the first question came in a little bit early as we were talking about creating a new account. So the question is, to clarify, you only need your own account if the plan is to upload data. Is that correct?
Correct. If you navigate to the RIDE system, you'll navigate there as a public user, and there is some functionality as a public user to review facility information and see all the listings, all the submittals. You can see that information, but if you want to upload submittals, those little plus signs next to the submittal types won't appear unless you're a registered RIDE user and you log in through your MyLogin account.
Gotcha. Thank you. This question's got kind of a two-parter to it. I'm going to read the first one and try and clarify something, then leave it to you guys, the experts. So the question is, will EGLE still require hard copies of submittal forms along with CD copies of the reports? And so I want to clarify that going through RIDE is not submitting a CD, right? So submitting documents through RIDE is submitting data and documents actually, in an electronic form. So there wouldn't be a CD copy that's actually sent in this scenario. With that, no, the submittal forms are not required if you're submitting through RIDE. So go ahead and confirm that for me before I move on.
Yep, that's exactly right. So it's an alternative. So you can either use RIDE and fill out the EQP form electronically and add your report as an attachment. That's option one. Option two is to go through the traditional way of providing a hard copy of the EQP form and a copy of your report on CD through the mail to the district office. So it's either one or the other, it's not both.
Gotcha, cool. And so then in that second scenario, which would include all 201 submittals, correct? This is only RIDE at this time is only for Part 213 submittals.
Correct. Part 201 submittals, we still require to come through the mail with a hard copy of the form and a CD until we're able to roll out functionality to allow Part 201 submittals.
Great, cool. So that was that question is yes, if you are submitting a CD, it would require a hard copy of the form. So awesome, thank you. The second part of this question is that for some items, RIDE requests miles instead of feet. I know Steve, I think you talked about the different units for some of the items. Will EGLE update the form so that project managers can provide those numbers to other staff members that are doing the submittals for them? So I think the question is if there's kind of a disconnect from maybe the EQP forms in the units that's asked there versus what's asked in RIDE. Is there a plan to update those forms so that they match? I think that's kind of how I interpreted that question.
There is a plan to update forms to provide some clarity both on units. We're also looking at those forms kind of holistically to determine which questions we think are still necessary and relevant to be on those forms. So there is kind of a revision process going through for those forms, but the idea would be that at the end, the paper forms would match exactly with the electronic forms, including units. And we would include some notes on the paper form that would say, please provide this distance in feet, not miles, whatever.
Great, thank you. And feel free to clarify your question if I interpreted that wrong. The next question is for an audit letter response letter. So do we submit the audit letter response letters in the non-form tab?
So Courtney, maybe I'll let you.
Yep, I can take that one. You do submit your audit response letters, say you insufficient or a denial, and you need to communicate back. That is another form of correspondence that would be submitted under the non-form tab.
Great, thank you. This question came in, Steve, while you were talking about some of the EQP forms. The notice of migration EQP 4482 says that it was commented that that should not be submitted under Part 213. The question is that they were under the impression that that form was required to support EQP 4506.
I think I can take that one too.
Okay.
Or Steve and Courtney could jump in on this, but we have some forms that are sort of required to be part of your report. And those forms would need to be filled out and included in your attachment. What we're referring to is the sort of submittal form. That's what you don't want to duplicate and submit. But if there are supplemental forms that are required as part of your, for example, your FAR or your closure. I know we have some forms for, I think affidavits, right? And some different things like that. those would still need to be filled out and included in your attachment. It's just that sort of primary submittal form that we would say you don't need to have included. Anything to add to that, Courtney or Steve?
So I'm not completely familiar with 4506, but after doing a little digging while this was going on, that looks like it's a water form, an EQP. And so I believe Nick is saying that our notice of migration is required to be submitted in part of theirs. So in that case, it would be allowed as a form for 213. I don't believe that functionality is rolled out yet, so that would still have to be submitted hard copy. So it can be, that would go on to environmental mapper that way.
Gotcha. Thank you, Courtney, for looking into that. What would someone do if you pull up a site on RIDE and the site location map is wrong?
You can contact us. That information comes to us from Lara when they enter. So we have all the Part 211 sites, which are sites that are regulated by Lara that aren't yet Part 213 sites. And when they become a confirmed release, then they become regulated under Part 213. And so that preliminary location data is all data that migrates from the Lara's database, their Acela system, if you're familiar with that. And sometimes that data can be wrong. And sometimes RIDE data can be wrong. So contact us. We can contact the people at Lara and ask them to fix it on in their database. And that will communicate with RIDE and update the location.
Great, thanks. So I will, one kind of as a plug here, make sure to save that eagle-ride-admin@michigan.gov email address. That's where a lot of these questions for site specific kind of things while you're in RIDE, if you're having an issue with something, reach out to that email address, and folks monitoring that will get back to you. A lot of times owner operators want the consultants to handle the submittals for them. What happens if owner operators do not want to join RIDE?
I think this is the most common comment or question that I've received. It's viewed by many, and I understand why, and I share the concern that it can be cumbersome for an owner operator to go through the process of setting up an account when maybe they only have one submittal that needs to be certified in a year or two. A lot of this is driven by the state of Michigan and how they're handling, how we as a state and all the different departments are handling electronic signature and certification. And the solution for that was the MyLogin system. So the idea behind that system is to have a single username and account to access all these different applications. So your owner and operator might already have a MyLogin account because of other information that they have to deal with the state of Michigan as a business owner. In that case, it might make it a little easier for them to navigate and get access to the RIDE system and navigate to the certification process. RIDE is voluntary, so you always have the option of going back and submitting the paper form with a CD through the mail to the district office if they simply just don't want to use RIDE. It's just a voluntary option at this point. All of that said, I'm in conversations with our compliance and enforcement section, and they're talking with the folks at the state of Michigan, and we're trying to look at what could potentially be an alternative to creating a MyLogin account and a RIDE account to do these certifications. So we are looking to see if there's any other option available. Right now, these are the options that we have.
Great, thank you. There's a couple more. kind of in line with that. I know someone just wrote back and said Dave just answered their question. So I appreciate that. That was a great answer. I'm going to hit, I think, one more that I think can be answered, maybe just talking about the process for actually submitting these. So is there an option for a qualified consultant to submit on behalf of owner operators for SIRs? And I think that, that kind of gets to the process of submittal and then the certification. And so if you want to maybe just, kind of summarize and encapsulate that again, the option for qualified consultants to submit on behalf of owner operators for those SIRs.
So right now, an SIR is one of the submittal types that does require secondary certification. I believe it's IAR, FAR, closure, and SIR. So if it's something that, if RIDE didn't exist and you were providing to the district office using that SIR form, you would need to get the owner operator signature for. And anything like that, RIDE requires secondary certification for. So it depends on the information, whether or not that should be on an SIR, or maybe it's a non-form. So that might be something that you want to talk to your project manager about. Maybe Courtney can elaborate on it a little bit, but you'll want to make sure that if it is information that belongs under an SIR cover form, then it does require the secondary certification.
Correct. So it's limited on what would go into a non-form, as Steve said, extension request, if it's just a correspondence responding to an audit. But if it's an amendment to an audit or conditional approval where you're adding extra stuff, those have specific forms. One of the other questions that was asked was regarding state funded work. A state funded work for a Part 213, you're not submitting an IAR, a FAR, a closure, a cert. You're typically just submitting information. It doesn't come in under an EQP. Those would come in under a non-form, so that way it gets to the project manager and it gets in the system. So that would be another scenario where if you have state funded work, the information can come in through RIDE that way, and that would not require the secondary certification, since it is on behalf of the state, not the owner legal entity.
Right. And the only scenario I could see would be if we asked a state contractor to do a closure report, because we want to.
They can't submit the closure report. That would have to, the owner operator would have to submit that, or the owner would have to submit that at that time.
Okay.
We can't do
So
this.
work with your state project manager.
Yep.
So I think the last one kind of in that sort of realm of questions, and maybe this is just, again, I know you're working with CNE, and maybe it's just something, to consider, because I think the answer at this time is no, but something to consider maybe in the future is, can an owner operator provide his consultant permission via contract to provide secondary certification on their behalf? So I think the answer right now is no, but again, something that, maybe can be considered with those conversations that you're having with CNE. Fair?
Yep, that's correct. And again, it's a concern that I share too. We want RIDE to be a success. We want it to be the place where people go to submit their reports, so that they're not, we're moving away from the old way of doing things and the traditional mail. And as easy as we can make that, that's what we're trying to do. We just haven't identified an alternative that's acceptable to the state beyond the MyLogin system at this point, but we're trying to figure that out.
Great, thank you. So moving on, we've got some more questions here. Do you have to complete an entire submittal at one time, or can it be saved as draft and come back and revisit that?
It cannot be saved as draft. Obviously your attachment, that can be saved and worked on, and then you upload that when it's completed. But if you start the submittal process, the system does not save partway through the submittal process. You have to either complete it all, or you lose the information that you've entered.
Great, thank you. What happens if you forget to attach your report? Can you go back and attach it if you've already clicked submit?
It's a good question. I think you would need to probably re-enter the information. I don't think there's a way to re-access that a submitted submittal unless it would be that revise a submittal. Courtney, do you know the answer to that?
If you've hit submit, you have to do a new submittal if the attachment wasn't attached. In that case, often you'll get an email from one of our information management unit IMU staff saying, hey, you submitted something, it didn't have the attachment, please go back and resubmit and include the attachment. We do expect that's probably going to be one of the first things we do wrong. I admit I don't always attach my attachments to email, so it's just getting used to that happening, but you cannot go back and reattach it.
Thank you. If someone uses the RIDE system to submit reports, can MUSTA and the legacy programs access this info so that separate report submittals to the fund are no longer necessary?
These reports are for EGLE RRD and the 213 project managers. If you have other reporting requirements for MUSTA, work with MUSTA to get them their reports. There may be opportunity to share this data with MUSTA in the future. I know those people have access to our reports once they're in. But if you have reporting requirements for a different entity, then you're going to want to work with them and do whatever they require.
Great, thanks. 2 more questions here. Can voluntary monitoring reports be submitted under non-form?
I think so. Would that be the appropriate category?
That's the supplemental information form.
Okay.
Great. And then the last one that we got here, and then we'll wrap it up, is kind of a broad question about that secondary certification. Can you confirm which reports would require that secondary certification?
Right. It would be anything where on the form it requires an owner-operator signature. So I believe that's IAR, FAR, closure, and SIR for the Part 213 submittals.
And then on top of that, your amendment to your IAR, your revised FAR, and your revised closure.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm sitting here and I see no more questions coming in. So a couple just reminders as we wrap up here today. The webinar today was recorded. So we will, like I said, I hope to share an email with a link to that as soon as it gets uploaded. It'll probably be on our YouTube account, but the easiest way to find it, I think, would be on the EGLE RIDE website. We hope to get that loaded up there as soon as possible. If you have any additional questions, you feel free to reach out to me. I will probably pass you on to one of the experts here that we're presenting today, or make sure to keep that eagle-ride-admin@michigan.gov email address. Dave, did you have any closing comments? Otherwise, thanks, Dave, Steve, and Courtney for all of your help. Anything, Dave, before we sign off?
Nope. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. Have a great rest of your week.